All right, so one thing I admire about a certain group of people is their ability to transform a seemingly impossible goal into something that's plausible enough to encourage the participation of a lot of different people. And I think that if you look at any positive instance of political, social, environmental, and technological change, you're going to see this skill set in action. And I think that if you want to get a 101 education in this pursuit, you'd be able to find it pretty accessibly in sales. At least that's been my experience. I've been in a couple different positions on the track, and I've been in situations where I've had to communicate the significance of what my company does in a way that overcomes any initial hesitation and or skepticism. And in each one of these pitches, the conversation kind of referenced a mission statement of the company that essentially said that they were in the service of a broader purpose. They were doing more than just providing the individual good or service that they got paid to do. And a lot of tech companies and SaaS companies in particular have mission statements that essentially say that what we're doing is in the service of humanity more generally. And that might sound a little bit corny, but I challenge you to go on a couple different websites and see what's going on. Whether it's tax software, mental health care startup, or restaurant menu app, you're going to see a lot of lofty language in there. And it's not a bad instinct to have a mission statement that is ambitious. It's not a criticism on my part, but I ultimately believe that it's foolish to think that anyone that hears a mission statement would take it at face value, because there are so many out there. There are a dime a dozen, and they all basically say the same thing. We are in the service of humanity more generally, blah, blah, blah. So speaking from experience, when I started to say mission statements, I got a lot of glazed eyes and people were tuning out and they thought I was being insincere. And honestly, they have every right to feel like that. So one thing I'm proud of during my time as an account executive is I kind of tinkered with the language a little bit and figured out how to communicate these big, hairy, audacious goals in a way that actually sounded believable, in a way that actually sounded like we were on the right track. And I'd love to kind of break down some of the language that I use. I'm in no way a sales guru or an expert or anything like that, but some of the phrasing that I've used has made my life a little bit easier on the job. So this template can be applied to any mission-driven company. It doesn't really matter what kind, as long as they have a big, hairy, audacious goal. But we're going to use impossible foods because a lot of people are familiar with that. So let's get to it. All right. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you making the time. I'd love to briefly introduce you to impossible foods and why we exist in the first place. Everything we do is motivated by this big, hairy, audacious goal that honestly might even sound a little absurd. Our goal is to prevent an impending ecological disaster from obstructing people's ability to live happy, healthy, and fulfilling lives. There are seemingly a million different reasons why scientists are warning us that the Earth is in the middle of its sixth mass extinction. And you probably know more than most people what some of those reasons are. Believe it or not, one of the biggest contributors to this problem is the way that the food industry sources our food. The way the industry handles animal agriculture is so destructive on the global environment that it far exceeds the waste of any other technology on Earth. The greenhouse gas footprint of animal agriculture rivals that of every car, truck, bus, ship, airplane, and rocket ship combined. Animal agriculture pollutes and consumes more water than any other industry. So Impossible Foods is simply enabling a sustainable way for people to enjoy their favorite foods. We are creating the world's most delicious, nutritious, affordable, and sustainable meat, fish, and dairy foods directly from plants. So that's the first draft, and the beauty of sales is that it's a game of iteration. You see what works, what doesn't work, and adjust based on new information that you get. But I would feel totally comfortable memorizing that pitch and saying that on the first 50 calls and seeing how it lands. So now we're going to break down the skeleton of the draft and modify what can be used across the board. So the first thing we do is we say thank you. We set up a brief agenda. I want you to get comfy, and I want you to know that I'm going to tell you what the creation myth of this company is. Then we're going to acknowledge the fact that this mission statement that I'm about to tell you, the reason why we exist, is a little bit absurd sounding, because honestly, you probably are a little bit defensive, and I want to disarm you and make sure that we keep it real. Then I'm going to explain the mission simply, no BS, very, very, very straightforward. I'm going to acknowledge that there are many obstacles to this mission, that far exceed what we do. Ultimately, we're not a panacea. It's very insincere for any company to say that we are the magic bullet to everything. But we're trying to also acknowledge that you, the person on the other end, also have good insight and experience and expertise. You are an expert as well. You know as much or maybe even more than I do. And I want you to make sure that you know that your perspective matters and that I'm not just going to be talking down to you throughout the whole conversation. Then we're going to define the specific problem that we are solving. Ultimately, we are good at solving X, Y, and or Z. And if you're not familiar with that problem that we're solving, obviously it would be my pleasure to educate you on what the situation is, the consequences, and what our approach is. And then we're going to go to the demo, and that's pretty much it. So it's not a magic bullet by any means, but it is a good tool to hold me accountable, to make sure that I'm not being insincere, to make sure that I'm actually valuing the other person's time, that I'm not insulting their intelligence, and that I communicate that there's a reason why I'm at this company, that I'm not just a salesperson trying to get a check, but I'm actually curious and interested in the problems that we're solving. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I would love to meet you if you're interested in chatting. My Calendly is in the bio, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.